So do you want these things on the whole time? Do you want these things off with the speaker? How do you deal with masking? Okay, when I'm speaking? Okay. I know you are. Okay. I can see even through the mask.
Yeah, sometimes you have to have a second look.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Sure. Well, you still see that after. Yeah. You see, you still see that after. Yeah.
That's good music. Be nice to have it all day, wouldn't we? Okay. Good morning. I'm so glad to see all of you here, and there's a whole bunch of empty places. Maybe we can deal with that another time. Yes, and I have some things here, little things to go across, and then we'll have our prayer time, and then we'll have a special someone that's here that I haven't even met. So, yeah, we're gonna make it. When I was a kid, I didn't know. Well, we didn't have the paper then when I was a kid, and I didn't know about this until I had kids, and then they wanted to see Peanuts. How many watched Peanuts? Okay. Peanuts is a friend. And so he decided he would go out to get a Christmas tree because it was Christmas time. And so this little guy went out. I'm going to cover up the bottom. This little guy went out and got a tree. Now, I don't know how well you can see this tree. It's a very, very small one, and it doesn't have any much pictures on it. It doesn't have any limbs on it, really. And so he walked back in with it, and the kids, all the student kids, they just started making fun of it. That's not a Christmas tree. You can't do that. And then he said, it just needs a little love. I actually have one of those little trees in my front porch, in my house. But I want to share with you this morning another little story about love. And this story is called The Dachshund and the Piglet. Now, Bill and I had 3 different dachshunds, and we love those little things. But they made a lot of noise. They barked a lot. One chilling night on a bed of straw in a West Virginia barn, a very lucky pig was born. Pink was a runt by all measures. When he was born, neither Joanna Kirby, who helped the sow, the mother, deliver the litter that night, nor her husband or daughter were watching. Thought the tiny piglet would survive outside of his mother's womb. Luckily, Pink was given a chance of life by an unlikely benefactor. Of a litter of 11, Pink was the last to emerge, and it was immediately clear that he wasn't like his brothers and sisters. Pigs are normally born with their eyes open, and it takes just a minute before they are walking and nursing. They're about 3 to 4 pounds. Pink was less than a pound, with his eyes sealed shut against the world. He was frail, virtually hairless, and his tiny voice barely squeaked. He just lay in the box and quacked. Joanna called. She didn't even try to walk. He was just too weak. When she held the baby to its mother's to nurse, he wouldn't suck. And soon enough, his stronger siblings were pushing him around, trying to get Pink out of the bed and to ride himself on their weakest competitor. Joanna had an idea. The family dog, a small red dachshund named Tink, had always been loving to people and maternal to other animals, and she had a thing for pigs. The first time Tink was introduced to piglets, years before in their hog barn, this is not an Adventist people, she rounded them all up into a corner and started licking them, much bigger than she was. They were 25 pounds and much bigger than she was, but Tink didn't care. She was so happy and wiggly, she had a great big smile on her face. Another time, she nearly drowned in the soupy, thick mud of the hog pen when she ventured in, just to get near the animals. How many of you know how big a small dachshund is? Ours were small, but okay, so Tink had given birth to 2 pups herself recently, but one had been stillborn, and she was clearly distressed by the loss. Joanna decided to put Tink and Pink together and see if the pup would accept the pig as just another offspring. The same trick had worked recently with another dog's puppies. Tink had happily tucked them in among her own pups. Piglet fostering went as smoothly as a puppy placement had. Once Pink was left in the dog's crate, Tink went crazy. She licked him up thoroughly, and then she tucked him under her chin to keep him warm. And he even chewed off the rest of the umbilical cord. And when the other puppies were ready to nurse, she used her nose to encourage Pink to join them to her belly. To the Kirby's relief, Pink hatched onto Tink and began to feed. Tink treated him like royalty. I think he was actually her favorite, Joanna says. With such special care, Pink soon caught up in size and weight to his siblings, though he never was interested in rejoining with the pigs. His family now was strictly canine, and he'd rough and wrestle with the puppies as if nothing else was a sign. I want to show you something here. This is the picture, and I couldn't get a color one. I'm going to do better next time. The little dachshunds here, and you can see, what do you see? The pig. What color is he? He was white or pink, or his nose was pink. And that's where I got to thinking about it today. We are in an area we don't know people, whether they have brown skin, whether they have black skin, or whether they have white skin or gray. And we just don't know who they are. And I think that we need to learn to do that and to be loving and careful and help each other's things. And it just needs a little love. So we had several names on our prayer list that I know about. Benny Moore is not, I don't know where he is or what he's doing now.
He's good. Benny, I talked to Barbara this morning, and Benny is improving and getting therapy at home and walking on a treadmill and doing other things. So his daughter is still with him for a few days, and we're thankful for his improvement.
Okay, so Benny is on our prayer list. Larry Engel had a heart attack this week, and he's in the hospital, I assume. I'm not sure, haven't heard anything more about that. I don't know how many of you know Fred Reimer. He was he was in Alabama for a long time, and he has pneumonia and is in the hospital, and they're really not going to expect him to live. And I don't know whether any of you know Richard Halleck, but we know that you know all of them. And you see that Richard has been in the life care for what, 2 years, 3 years, almost 3 years. And so they've gone through a lot of work. And so now he's in with the COVID part, because he picked up from people in the place. And Connie hasn't had contact with him for at least a year. She can go watch him, but she can't. And so we don't know where that's going to go to either. And so I just want to remember that. I know there are others, and if you know somebody else, let's just raise your hand that needs that special prayer. And we want to thank God that he's going to be able to take care of us and help us to live. So let's have a prayer here. Dear Father in heaven, I know that you know what's happening in our world. We have a lot of people suffering, but we know that you know what's going to happen. And we ask that you help us to reach out to the many people in the world that are sick. Families are grieving. So we ask that Jesus can come quickly. You are suffering with your people, and in time, you will help each of you to be ready and go home with Jesus. Amen. Okay, we're happy to have someone with us this morning that I haven't even met. Dr. Keith Snyder, am I right?
Right.
Where? Okay. And he's the chairman of the biology department at Southern. And so I haven't had the privilege to meet him, and I'm supposed to introduce him, but I would like for him to come up and give some information about yourself and let me know too, because I'd like to meet you. Oh, well, here, I'll help. Yeah, we had our prayer. Okay. Get a little difference here. Thank you.
I'm the lucky one. I get to take this off. In teaching, I'm going nuts trying to figure out what's going on with the students. I don't know if they get my jokes. I don't know if they understand what's happening, if it gets through. It's like this. They're probably yawning inside. I don't know, there's a whole lot to say. I'm happy to be back here. It's the first time I've actually been in this church for about 6 months. So I used to attend here moderately often, but I've been drawn elsewhere for other reasons, but I'm happy to be back here. What we'll do today is, what's our quit time?
11:30.
11:30. So we have some time. I am not a preacher, not to offend those who are preachers. I am not a preacher. And therefore, I will be asking a lot of questions. I'm a longtime teacher, so I'm not afraid to point if I don't know somebody for your input. So nobody's exempt that's in here, even those on the back row, back there.
And online.
And online, that's right. I'll have Doug do the pointing for wherever he's pointing. To those online, please, those who are online, ask questions. Doug will get it to us. We'll try to deal with those. And as with other things in our department, we have a group, professionals learning together. So my goal is that we learn together as we dig into this lesson. I will be reading some excerpts from the lesson. Those will be launching pads off into questions. And then I'll bring in a few other personal thoughts throughout the time. But I want to have a fairly good discussion time, since I really want to learn from you people, from everybody that's here. One of the first things I noticed as I was going through this, we have education in arts and sciences. And if you look at the title, the sciences are really big. Of course, that's where it should be, I'm sure. But I'm not quite sure how that came about. I think the lesson is a little more heavily weighted to the sciences, but that was just an interesting note as I was starting out on this.
Do I need to stand up for the arts?
No. My mom was a full-fledged artist. I inherited some of that, so I do, and with the work that we've done in the hallways and stuff, I've learned a whole lot more about the art side of it. So I think that I probably can cover some of these areas fairly reasonably. Whatever reasonable means. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Let's start out a little bit of background. Education in arts and sciences. How did science start? What was science? We put science up on a pedestal for whatever. How did chemistry start?
It was curiosity.
Curiosity. Yes, curiosity. Well, who in the world had time for curiosity? You had to go out there and work so you'd be so tired by the time you get home. In the Western world, and somewhat in the larger world historically, those who had more time were pastoral leaders or religious leaders. They had more time, they had more finances, they were leaders, they had education, and so they were natural leaders, which meant that pastors, you can say that, really were our first scientists. It's interesting for some of us to think about. In fact, I think that many of the pastors, the religious leaders, saw things around them in nature. And what they saw was fairly logical for most things. They saw both good and evil. And that fit into the mindset of, God and Satan interactions.
An online comment from Ray Reed Appeal says, creation was the beginning of science.
Creation is the beginning of science. No. Let's push it way back before that. Somebody had to create the angels. I mean, there's got to be science involved in everything. And see, this is where we're trying to split. In my mind, science, art, relationships, everything really is a package, and we try to separate into little boxes our little expertise so we can feel good about ourselves, I guess. Or maybe because there's so much to know that we can only work on just a little bit. But yes, it started way back, certainly before us. And I'm sure that it all started at the beginning. We will come back to that in just a moment. Let's take the pastoral view again. And I'm not a pastor, therefore I'm putting words into some other people's mouths, and we have some pastors here who can correct me if I'm wrong. Many of those who look and see nature around, who have the time to really explore what's going on, they're curious. They can see order and think, well, maybe God is a God of order. There are certain laws. You drop something, yep, it goes down. You let go of it, it goes down again. And you keep repeating this. That seems to be kind of a law that we have. So, maybe God is a God of order. And let's try to figure out what that order is. That's the curiosity, trying to figure out what his orders are. Many of the pagan religions had gods of whim. Oh, the gods are fighting again, or the gods are incestual, or the gods are this or that. They didn't know what the gods were doing, continually giving offerings because they didn't know what the gods were doing. But those that saw God as one God, God must have rules because I see rules happening around us. I think the same way. These religious leaders were also the leaders in art. They had a little bit more time. They said, man, this stuff is so pretty. I've got to share this with somebody else. And so they draw or make or create or do something or sing or play instruments to calm crazy kings or whatever it might need to be done. Those pieces, I think, also originated from religious leaders, and they wanted to share with others. So let's move up to today. What went wrong? Why do we seem to have this somewhat of a dichotomy? Let me read something to start with. And sometimes I back into everything. I'm going to the end of my lesson here. And read. The conflict thesis says that religion and science are fundamentally at loggerheads with each other. It gets much more of its popular steam from stories such as Galileo's. Of course, Galileo was right about heliocentrism, and the medieval church was wrong. But the narrative is skewed, claiming that this was a clear-cut case of science versus religion, and that science won. The fact is, Galileo believed in God and the Bible, and did so for his whole life. His initial trouble was not with the church, but with the academy. The academy was the thought pattern with whoever was in charge of the academics. In a letter in 1615, he claims that the academic professors who opposed him tried to influence Roman Catholic Church authorities to speak out against him. Galileo's scientific arguments were a threat to the reigning Aristotelianism of the academy. Rome aligned itself with a worldview that was supported by the Italian philosophers and professors. This understanding doesn't absolve the Roman Catholic Church of its treatment of Galileo, but it does show that Rome was simply in harmony with the reigning academic paradigm of the day. So the church was following the academics. Does that still happen today? Questions? Comments?
Well, I'll go and suggest that the Creation Museum in your department, which is countering an evolutionary theory, suggests that many Christians today have just followed the academy or the academic world and saying, well, this is how we should interpret the Bible. They're seeing the Bible through academic eyes rather than seeing academia through the Bible.
Agreements? Disagreements? Yes, ma'am.
I feel like a lot of people think that science is their God. Even people in churches who claim to be religious, they will say, but it's not science. You can't believe this because it's not science. And rather than look to the Bible and what God has to say.
So many people look at science as their religion.
It's kind of a freestanding thing, opposed to science and art and other things. It's just, I mean, they're put them as freestanding items there that we have to believe in instead of religion being the head of them all.
Okay, so science often tries to take the leadership position in what it does.
This is one of the major problems, that what science believes today is very different from what science believed last year or the year before, and it'll be different in many aspects. They change their mind, they flip-flop as new stuff comes up. So that seems a little scary to me, to allow science to call leadership as opposed to looking to the Bible and then assessing what science has to say in relationship to that.
So science is changeable.
Well, that's pretty obvious with COVID. You know, CDC keeps changing.
I mean, you don't trust the CDC?
What?
You don't trust the CDC?
I didn't say I didn't trust you. So that's like you said.
And he's a COVID survivor. So just for your information.
I am aware of that. I am aware of that. Wow. Let's come back to that in just a moment. Oh, yes.
Well, I'm kind of playing the role of, I shouldn't say devil's advocate, but the other side.
Choose another side. Great.
Yeah, so even an example here, or places like this, there's a university campus right next to a church, or maybe vice versa, depending on how you look at it. So a lot of times religion can overshadow and drive what science should really be teaching. So I see it both ways. It kind of depends.
So you're saying that because this is a religious institution, it drives everything else that happens here.
Well, it has power perhaps over what can be taught and so forth. That's all, not even this institution per se, but when a religious organization kind of merges or has a partnership with academia, there can be that kind of power play, so to speak.
There does seem to be a whatever is underneath an organization, whatever their thought pattern is, follows whatever they say, no matter what's attached to it. And this being an academic institution, under a religious body, the religious body kind of directs what's happening. That may be great, that may be poor, but that's what kind of it influences it heavily. Are there comments, Doug, that you have come up with online, people?
No, we're looking for comments online, but I remember something you said to me years ago that I put in a sermon, and you probably don't even remember what you said.
That's more and more common.
Yeah. But I do remember that you said that in some of your classes in the biology department, what you taught 2 years ago is already out of date and you have to get new textbooks.
Well, that's because they want more money. But there are a lot of things that do change. So yes, there are some things. Let me back up for just a moment.
I was going to say I was glad that my textbook hadn't changed in 2,000 years.
That's good. We'll come back to that in just a moment. We'll come back to that. Let me talk about this conflict thesis. Is the religion following the science as applied to Rome? This terminology was for the Roman Catholic Church in Galileo's time. What do we see in the Roman Catholic Church today that would mirror what I read here? Does anybody know what's happening? The acceptance of evolution. The Roman Catholic Church last year put out an edict, or whatever they call this, that yes, evolution, we accept evolution, and that was just scary to me. There are nuances. Yes, God started something, but then let evolution take over and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of like siding in and trying to fit with the science of the day. So I think what's happening hundreds of years ago is the same thing happening today. We have to be aware of that and what's going on. What do secular scientists think when they hear this? Well, the Roman Catholic Church finally acknowledged the right thing. What about the rest of you dummies that can't get onto board? It really weakens the Bible and the responsibilities that we have to God and to the Bible. Let me read something else here. The history of science shows a piling up of stupendous gains and insights, both theoretical and technological. From medical advances to information technology, we are indebted to the scientific community for its indefatigable efforts to improve modern life. Those advances, however, ride on a veritable ocean of mistakes, discarded theories, and outdated paradigms that were retained past their prime due to many variables, including that all disciplines are susceptible to prejudice and bias. So this is coming to what you mentioned, Doug. In light of this theory, why should it not be considered eminently reasonable to take scientific truths with reserve instead of jumping with all fours into the next scientific theory, which may slip into the scientific dustbin in a generation? Let's just stop there. Let's just ignore science, because it's going to be changed anyway next week.
Ray Rita again says, science may change, but the Bible never changes. So she may be jumping ahead to a point you're going to make later.
Yes, we'll hold that for just a moment. Let's talk about the scientific side first, and then we'll look at the religious side. Scientific side first. Why is so much of what we see as science getting dumped? Come on, Holly.
All right. I can think of a lot of reasons. You think of pharmaceutical companies and financial gain and political agendas and other kinds of things. But the issue is that there is always good mixed with the bad. And so there's a lot of science that has a good evidence base that has been well researched. It's just trying to figure out which of that is really good and which isn't. And that's a very, very difficult thing. As a healthcare provider, I do things, sometimes I even prescribe a medicine that then turns out to be black box before too long. And, we just didn't know enough about it. And it makes me do some things a little differently and think a little differently to try to hang on to the old and not jump to the new quite as readily, and to try to think critically about how the research was done. It is a very complex thing, obviously.
Yes, Judd, is that you?
Yeah.
Did people get that? Doug, was that?
I'm not sure. Repeat.
Okay, let me just repeat something for a second. It's a very complex issue, Holly said, and what we think is good today, we may research further and find that it's not as good tomorrow, and there's something that's better. So change occurs as we continue to learn. Judd.
I think there's also an underlying philosophical current in our society, in our culture, and it has a lot to do with worldviews. And we're in a culture now of skepticism.
Okay, we're in a culture of skepticism.
Absolute. Such science tends to give absolute ultimatums. But that society, our culture, challenges that. This is a culture of disbelief now. We talked about postmodernism for years ago, which discards the absolutes. Well, now we're really in a culture now that's postmodernism. And so it's post everything. So everything is called into question.
So you're saying,
And so whether it's science or religion or even philosophy, of course the political rhetoric that we can bring out, it doesn't matter which side you're on. We know there's a lot of false rhetoric out there. And so everything is called into question. And so it's no surprise that science is going to be questioned because of the basic philosophy and culture of disbelief.
so you're suggesting that our culture now is questioning absolutely everything, no matter how firm it was or how firm it wasn't. Holly,
At the same time, we have a culture that is also oriented toward quick fixes. And so they can jump onto something that's not really true, just because it sounds easy and it sounds good.
so we like quick fixes.
Yeah. So it's really a defective society because you get that element and you get some of these other elements. And then when you try to fit religion into the picture, religion isn't a quick fix. I mean, it is and it isn't.
Ooh, well, we will go down that rabbit hole. It's being a quick fix or not. Doug?
Jerry and Verna Karst online have this comment: truth has never been judged by the number of people who are willing to follow
Right.
Never judged by the number of people willing to follow it. Okay, thank you.
Isn't there a lot of science research that is being paid for by companies who are looking for certain results, and scientists that will research in order to support those results and retain those that find different are fired?
Are you suggesting science is biased?
Without
Oh, okay, well, from one scientist to another, I'm sure that can't be right. We see that all around us. Let me switch a little bit to the religious side. A comment was made that the Bible hasn't changed in 2,000 years. Now, we're assuming we're not talking about the Catholic Bible, right?
Well, yeah.
Okay. But what we know as the Bible hasn't changed. Let me give you a view. I spent 4 years in a public university for my doctorate. And let me give you a view from the mindset of the atheist mindset. I look out there as an atheist, and I see more religious people in more different types of religions than I could count. I have no idea. There's a split of this Baptist and that Baptist and the other this and the Methodist this and that, and you got splits. You got the Muslim, you got the Christian, and they all seem to be fighting each other, and that's a mess. If this doesn't change, or whatever is the basis for religion doesn't change, they can't even get it right. How would you react to that?
We as people that are believers have to take that comment seriously. We've created a situation in which I have a brother-in-law whose brother was an Adventist missionary and is now an atheist because he bought into those arguments.
We don't have all the answers. We do need to try to put ourselves in other people's seat. We also need to be very humble when we do this, because there are so many things that are not the best out there. All right, let me take us into a different situation. Shifting gears here a little bit. In my general biology class, about 3/4 of the way into the first semester, we talk about some of these creation, evolution. Basically, it's set up under evolution in the books that we're teaching from. And I tell the students, I said, all right, put yourselves in their shoes. You have started out with the assumption that there is no God. None of my senses can grasp God. None of my 5 physical senses can grasp God. Therefore, there is no God. However, I'm here and you're there and you're here, so we came here somehow. How do we get here? And then I give them 10 or 15 minutes to discuss how we got here. I'm not going to do that this morning. How do you deal with that? When they go through that process, they are forced into what we hear. What do they call it? GUDU or something like this. Process of slow evolutionary. There's no other valid point, because you can't get it from outside the universe or outside the solar system in other parts of the universe. That just pushes the question back. So it has to start from somewhere. How do we deal with this? I told you I wasn't going to ask really easy questions today. See, who haven't I heard of? Who I start? Okay, go ahead.
It actually takes faith to believe in evolution as much as it does faith to believe in God.
So it takes faith to believe in evolution or God.
There is nothing totally, absolutely provable about evolution.
Can't prove it. Nobody was there, right? I tell my evolutionist friends, that we really believe the same thing. You believe that everything came from nothing. I believe everything came from nothing. We believe the same thing. Let's forget about all the rest of this stuff. And amazingly, it breaks down some of these barriers. Big Bang from nothing, we can't explain what nothing to us. We can explain how God spoke and we were. We don't understand that very well either. So it's an interesting thing to try to grapple with. Because the naturalist, if they do not sense or cannot feel, see, hear, pressure, or a God, then they have to accept there is no God. And if they accept that, they're not stupid people. They're very brilliant people. And so it's just a piece. Now, as was mentioned to you, go ahead.
Science is repeatable. You should be able to have the same result done by different scientists and get the same result, or else it's not verifiable. And so there's nothing verifiable about evolution from the very beginning. So the presuppositions that they take compared to Christians are equally as faith-based as one another.
So the presuppositions the evolutionists have are also faith-based. Right? None of us know anything unless we gain it from some other part. Let me shift gears yet again. First Timothy 6:20. It says, Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to your care. Turn away from godless chatter and the opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge. Falsely called knowledge.
Online, Jerry and Verna's comment here is we don't have to win every argument. It's not necessary to tear down someone else's house in order to build our own.
That's right. We don't have to tear their house down. If you've had a chance, you're all invited to come over to the science building, second floor, the hallways, go through. There's a little booklet you can take to help guide you through. When we built that, we asked the students what they wanted to see, what they wanted to know. And they said, we don't care about the arguments against evolution. We don't care. All we want to know is what are the arguments for creation. And so we have purposely tried to build that thought pattern into the hallways, not stepping on somebody else, but presenting our opinion, or at least a possible opinion, to start people thinking. So that's very appropriate. In 1 Timothy, falsely called knowledge. Think about all the information, the teaching, the beliefs, not only now, but also throughout human history that were flat out wrong. People can indeed become experts in error. Experts in error. We see that the scientific method is you have a hypothesis, you collect data, you check the results, you see what's going on, you loop back through it again. You just keep looping through this to move ahead. What do we do in religion? Shout louder? How do we do this? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think number one, if you're dealing with Christians that are following Christ, you don't have to shout. People will see him in you. And I think, too, the perspective, like for me, a lot of scientific stuff that they've come out with, like with the Hubble telescope, that has found the universe is billions of times bigger than we thought. To me, that was, wow, God is so awesome. Everything that they find, I related that's So look how God created us, how every part of our body functions in a different, and the atoms. I mean, human beings had no idea what an atom was, and then they found it. But God knew from creation. To me, science pushes me back, just thinking how awesome God is.
But you're trying to get to the end already.
Yeah.
You see the junction of art, creation, science as glorifying God. And I think that's where things started. Judd first.
Just reflecting on the enterprise of Christian apologetics, defending the Christian faith. The classic apologetics is using the best arguments. And it's interesting that there's a host of books coming out now by apologists, Christian apologists. They're taking a whole different approach. Good argument, a logically put together argument is still very important. But now, instead of the argument ruling, it's relationships.
Okay, just a moment. Let me repeat that. You're saying that in a Christian apologetics, arguments carefully pulled together are very important, but now it's shifting somewhat to giving more weight to relationships.
To building a relationship with someone.
Or to building a relationship.
Then in the context of that friendship, what you develop a friendship, then you can share your faith, and then that's the time to give in a friendly way the rationale for what you believe.
So build the friendship first.
Now is in this, and again, it's related to what I said earlier about this post, society which is rejecting everything. Relationships is the key, and interestingly, if you go back to Jesus, that's how he operated.
So the relationships
people and then share the truth.
Were formed first, as Jesus was our example, and then we can share the truth. So you're right, we don't have to shout, we have to befriend. Let me jump to something else. Trying to make sure our time as well. There's a lot to deal with in here. I have a paper in my hand. It says, over 13,000 elements from a single bone bed help elucidate disarticulation and transport of an monosaurus thanatosynosis. Really? What in the world is that name? The lead author is Keith Snyder. I'm supposed to know what's going on here. So you got a major paper we got out this last 6 months ago in PLOS One. We had, let me give a little bit of background. In the past, both Dr. Chadwick from Southwestern and myself have had papers thrown out. One paper that he tried to publish about 6 years ago, the author just said, I'm not even going to look at this, or the reviewer, I'm not even going to look at it, it's written by a creationist. This same person, I didn't know it at the time, about 2 years ago, I was going through people who were big in this area, and so I sent an email to him. Said, I've got this question of this piece, this piece, this piece. So he looked me up and said, oh, you're at a religious institution, you must be either an idiot or a deluded lay person, something like this. Is as negative of terms as he could use. And that was Friday afternoon, I got that back. It's like, it bugged me all weekend. Just kind of, where's religious discomfort here? I didn't think too much about what I should have on Sabbath. Then, fortunately, I had pulled together enough information that I wrote him an email with, I think it was 11 or 12 references. And when do you put references in your emails? No. It was 11 or 12 references, and it was a long email. So this person says this, and this person says this person says this. I want to know this. He wrote back the nicest letter. Oh, well, this is blah, 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 blah. We just had to communicate at the level that they understand. He has something in his background, and we've communicated several times since. Even when this paper came out, I sent him a copy of it and said, I didn't say thank you on the back of this thing because I assumed you didn't want to be associated with the creationist side of things. And he kind of, every time he writes back, I'm so glad the Adventists have finally started to see the light on, this kind of stuff. So there's this sort of a relationship from someone who nobody else would ever be able to touch or to comment or to think through. And so as we were going through this, we were starting to write another paper. I want to go into it. This is all the dinosaur stuff that I've been working on with Dr. Chadwick. He's been working 22 years on it. I've been about 12 years on it, out there in Wyoming. And we're trying to figure out how these dinosaurs died, how they got transported, what was involved, this kind of stuff. We had common ground with another person, a professor up in Maryland, Dr. Ullman. And we invited him to Southwestern to help us collect the specimens off the bones that are kept there. Dr. Ullman accepted, and he came down. He'd written a paper about 3 years ago that was he had about 5,000 bones and the stuff he was looking at in that museum. And we spent 4 days together discussing things. Of course, he was a little wary what these creationist type strangers are going to be anyway, but he was young and he was willing to form a relationship there. So we talked about it, and we even discussed a few religious things. He was very polite when we prayed. We built a relationship there. It wasn't but 6 months later that he ended up being one of the reviewers for this article. And he gave us the best input. There were 98 changes he suggested in this thing. And we made 95 of them because they were good. He gave professional advice. We took the professional advice, but we had built a relationship first, as you were mentioning, needing to do. We are still working on that other paper. There's some other things going on. Why do scientists like myself work on this kind of stuff? I mean, who even knows what a thanatocynosis? Bone bed, maybe we can figure that one out. Single, yeah, that's one. Admonosaurus, no, that's a duck-billed dinosaur. Basically, what we have is approximately 4,500 dinosaurs, which are all buried in this one bone bed that we're working on. We don't know how it got there. So the journal, or the article here, is explaining all the processes, all the data we have from that. I can't say, and this was a point of discussion with, the typical comment is, well, this had to be in a curve of the river where a herd was crossing during flood stage, and some of them got wiped out and collected here and built up and all this kind of thing. That's the standard explanation. So we were able to say the standard explanation is this, but we cannot rule out and then give another explanation. That's the scientific method. Okay, the standard one is this. Here's another one to start the eyes opening up of, maybe there's a different way. The paper here takes information from South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, Canada, Alaska, and partially into Russia. These bone beds all have the statistically significant similarities. That's getting big. terms like catastrophic are used by, I can't use that term in the paper, but by other non-creationists, they can use that term. The catastrophic breadth of what we're seeing, those who really think about it are going to say, man, that must have been kind of worldwide. So that's the type of thing and the methodology we have to use to get into the thought pattern of the scientists. Now, enough bragging. Let's see. Let's move on to something important. Beauty. Beauty. I have to get into the arts. I love the arts in so many ways. Let me just ask you, let's see what the comment was here. Our papers were saying that really there is a concept, there's good beauty and there's bad beauty. And how do we discern that? I'll just start with that. Is there good beauty? Is there bad beauty? How do we know what that is?
I had a question about that when I read that, because I'm looking at it and saying, that sometimes there's an assumption behind that phrase, but if you believe that God is a God of beauty, if you believe in God and that He created beauty, is there bad beauty, or is there only beauty that may be perverted for evil, but it's still originally good? So I don't know. I'd love to hear somebody help me on that.
That's why I don't know how they jam both these things into one lesson. Other comments?
Wasn't Lucifer the brightest angel? Wasn't he
The brightest, the star, the best singer,
he was the highest angel in heaven, and so he was beautiful, but he turned it into where it wasn't. He was still beautiful, but inside was not. That's like you have some flowers that are so pretty, but you don't dare touch them because they'll kill you. So there is beauty, good and bad.
we have to try to figure out what that really means. Is beauty,
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And this, if I read it right, says that's not really true. I agree with you. So I'm struggling in my mind. Is beauty relative? Is beauty cultural? We tried to deal with beauty in the hallways over here, and we spent weeks in trying to figure this out.
Isn't it true that beauty can be used for wonderful purposes, and then in the wrong hands or with the wrong mindset, it can be used to produce evil? Just like if you have, TV as a medium, there's nothing wrong with broadcasting, but use it for the wrong purpose, then it becomes an evil channel or avenue.
So beauty is a tool to be used positively or negatively. We didn't really come up with an answer, but I personally think that beauty is somewhat cultural. I'm wearing something here. See this thing here. Some people say, oh, you're wearing a cultural bad thing. Other people say, oh, that means such and such and such. And it's a positive thing. So I think there's certain cultural influences.
So now you're going to have to tell us
What it is.
what it is.
Life is full of unknowns.
It's just nasty food.
We do have to think what kind of contributions that we can give to the positive side of things. How can we make something? I go to art shows and I say, okay. And other people are just, oh, there's got to be some kind of differences in us to appreciate or not appreciate certain types of beauty and certain musical things. In all that we do, I would encourage us that we're kind in our interactions. One of the definitions that this gives here is beauty is goodness made manifest to the senses. That's a philosopher. Maybe we need more philosophers, not as many scientists and artists or something. Beauty is goodness made manifest to the senses. In my mind as a scientist, I reword that a little differently. I think more about beauty is God-created receptors discerning God-created laws. As we see beauty, almost all these beautiful things follow laws that God created. But for me to understand it, there had to have been created within me, within my mind, an understanding of those laws and then perceive that as beauty. Because in evolution, beauty is a waste. It's a useless point and should be completely gotten rid of. So as we continue to work through, we shouldn't look down upon others. We should look at others, and I look at those in the science area, as having a more limited source of data than I have. I don't want to be proud of that, but I can go beyond the 5 physical senses to the Bible, to relationships, to what I know of God and experiential. These are pieces that I can draw upon as a scientist that they're limited and can't draw upon.
Keith, I know our time is almost gone, but you raised an interesting question to me because with my lack of computer ability, I would never look at a string of code and say, that's elegant and beautiful code. But a programmer might look at somebody else's work and say, wow, that's the most beautiful, it's so simple, it's such a great solution. And I'm sure in physics or math or in biology, there are things that you might see, whereas I might look at a sermon and say, wow, there's something about that is so beautiful, and somebody else would say, yeah, I didn't get anything out of it. But it's just, so the knowledge sometimes creates beauty. Is that what you're saying?
I believe that God-given knowledge does create that. I believe God was organized, created things, created us, and then put the two together so we can appreciate beauty. I would encourage you to go home and look up Fibonacci numbers. Fibonacci numbers.
Spell
FIB is about as far as you need to go. FIBBON, am I spelling this right? CCI? Fibonacci. Fibonacci numbers.
It's fascinating, yeah.
It is just absolutely fascinating of where Michelangelo used these tremendously. Thank you very much.
Can you have prayer for us?
Okay, let's have prayer. Gracious Father, we thank you so much for instilling in us a mind to think and instilling in us a mind to appreciate what you have created. Guide us. Thank you for the beautiful sunny, warm day today. Help us to enjoy the rest of the Sabbath with you and with others. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.